All right, let's kick off this explainer by taking a massive leap back in time, about 4.5 billion years to be exact. Just imagine Earth as this chaotic, flaming ball of rock, literally getting bombarded by space debris. Sounds completely hostile, right? But as the planet eventually cooled down and oceans formed, way down deep at the bottom of those ancient waters, scorching hydrothermal vents started brewing this crazy, complex chemical soup. And it was exactly that piping hot soup that set the stage for the most incredible chain reaction we know of, biology.
You know, we humans really love to think of ourselves in grandiose terms. But to quote a brilliant realization here, biology is really just chemistry in disguise. Seriously, when you strip everything away, you and I are essentially just big, incredibly complex balls of molecules that have somehow figured out how to make funny sounds. It's all just chemistry playing out on a massive, highly organized scale.
So here is our roadmap for today. We're going to tackle 5 key areas: chemistry in disguise, inside the cellular factory, the genetic construction manual, mutation, division, and evolution, and we'll wrap up with microbes and the nervous system. Let's dive right in. Part 1. Chemistry in disguise, focusing on the foundational building blocks of life. To truly grasp the sheer complexity of life, we absolutely have to start at this microscopic level.
Now, every living thing, including you, is made up of 4 main macromolecules. You've got your carbohydrates, which give you those quick bursts of energy. You have lipids, which handle long-term energy storage and create cellular boundaries. Then there are proteins, building your tissues, and of course, nucleic acids, forming your DNA. But here's the thing, just having the parts sitting there isn't enough. They actually have to interact, and that is exactly where enzymes come in. Enzymes are special proteins that act as catalysts. They speed up chemical reactions so we can function in real time. Take lactase, for example. It rapidly breaks down the lactose sugar in milk. Without these tiny chemical catalysts, life would literally just grind to a halt.
Okay, so all these chemicals are reacting, but what officially makes something alive? Well, scientists actually love to debate the exact fuzzy boundaries of this, but fundamentally, these 4 traits right here are the absolute core requirements. An entity has to metabolize food to produce energy, it has to grow, it has to reproduce, and it must respond to its environment. That, right there, is exactly why a cat, which does all of those things, is alive, and the rock it's sleeping on is definitely not. Moving into part 2, inside the cellular factory, where we'll look at powering and protecting the organism. Because when we move up a level from raw chemistry, we see that all living things are built out of these tiny cellular factories. But they definitely aren't all built the same way.
Right away, we see a huge divide between simple and complex life. Prokaryotes are your simple, single-celled organisms, things like bacteria. They don't have any fancy internal compartments. Their DNA is basically just free-floating inside. Eukaryotes, on the other hand, are highly organized. They have specialized membrane-bound organelles, and they lock their DNA safely away inside a nucleus. And it's exactly this higher level of organization that allows eukaryotes to form the complex kingdoms of life that we belong to, along with plants and fungi.
But listen, no matter what kind of cell you are, you share one ultimate goal: homeostasis. This is the constant, active balancing of your internal conditions. Whether it's your entire body sweating on a hot day, or just a single microscopic cell balancing its internal pH levels so its enzymes don't break down, homeostasis is what keeps you from, well, dying. For a cell, this crucial balance is managed by the cell membrane. It's what we call a semi-permeable phospholipid bilayer, which honestly is really just fancy science speak for a highly selective bouncer at the club door, carefully controlling exactly which molecules get in and out. Now, to keep that bouncer working and the whole factory humming, the cell needs power. Specifically, a highly energetic molecule called ATP, which is cranked out by the mitochondria during cellular respiration. But to make ATP, you need glucose, and here's where life splits on how it gets it. Heterotrophs, like us humans, we have to actually eat food and break it down to get our glucose. Autotrophs, like plants, they literally just stare at the sun. They use their green chloroplasts to soak up light energy, split water, and basically synthesize their own glucose from scratch. Kinda jealous, honestly.
All right, part 3, the genetic instruction manual, decoding DNA, RNA, and proteins. So we've got the energy powering the factory, but what is the factory actually supposed to build? To find out, we have to zoom straight into the nucleus to read the instructions.
And here is where we hit a massive logistical problem. Your DNA holds the exact recipes, the genes, for building proteins. It stores this code using pairs of nitrogenous bases. You know,
adenine bonding with thymine, cytosine with guanine. But the DNA is locked safely inside the vault of the nucleus, while the protein-building machines, the ribosomes, are floating around outside of it. So how on earth does the blueprint reach the construction site if the master copy can never leave the vault?
The cell solves this beautifully with a microscopic assembly line. First up is transcription. An enzyme unzips the DNA and creates a complementary, single-strand copy called messenger RNA or mRNA. Now, this mRNA can leave the nucleus. It travels out to the ribosome for step 2, translation. The ribosome reads that mRNA code in little 3-letter chunks called codons. Then specialized transfer RNA, tRNA, fetches the exact amino acids that match those specific codons. Finally, those amino acids get linked together into a long chain that physically folds up into a working protein. And those proteins literally go on to do everything in your body, from acting as enzymes to physically determining traits like your eye color.
Speaking of traits, let's talk about how those are decided. You inherit 2 versions of every gene, one from each parent, and we call these variations alleles. Let's look at the OCA2 gene, which controls melanin. If you inherit a dominant brown eye allele from one parent, boom, you're going to have brown eyes. That happens even if you also carry a hidden, recessive blue eye allele from your other parent. The dominant code just completely overrides the recessive one when it comes to your physical appearance. Part 4: Mutation, Division, and Evolution. Let's look at how life replicates, changes, and survives. Because this genetic code doesn't just sit there, it has to be managed, build entire bodies, and pass on to the next generation.
Get this. If you took the DNA out of just one of your microscopic cells and stretched it end to end, it would be roughly 2 meters long. 2 meters! It is an absolute packing nightmare. The cell manages this by tightly coiling the DNA around special proteins called histones. It compacts it into dense chromatin and finally folds it up into 23 pairs of those worm-like structures we call chromosomes.
So when a cell eventually needs to divide, it has to handle those chromosomes very carefully, and it uses 2 completely different methods depending on the goal. Mitosis is for your body's everyday maintenance. It takes one cell and splits it into 2 identical diploid copies, meaning they have the full set of chromosomes. That's strictly for tissue growth and repair. But meiosis, that's a whole different ballgame. It's used exclusively to create sex cells, sperm and eggs. During meiosis, the chromosomes actually mingle and swap genetic information in a process called crossing over. This shuffles the genetic deck to produce unique haploid cells with only half the chromosomes. That way, when they combine, the new life gets a perfect, entirely unique combination of traits.
But what happens when that meticulous DNA copying process makes a mistake? Well, you get a mutation. And while we almost always hear about mutations as a bad thing, they're actually the raw fuel for evolution. Imagine a whole population of yellow grasshoppers. If a random mutation causes just one of them to be born green, suddenly that green bug blends in perfectly with the grass. It doesn't get eaten by birds, meaning its fitness just skyrocketed. It survives, reproduces, and passes that beneficial green trait on. Over time, the entire population shifts green. And that, my friends, is natural selection in action.
Finally, Part 5: Microbes and the Nervous System. To wrap things up, we're going to contrast the absolute simplest biological entities with the most staggering complex systems biology has ever produced. On the simple end, we've got microbes. And here is a massive pro tip that gets confused constantly. Bacteria and viruses are not the same thing. Bacteria are actual living single-celled organisms. So if they cause an infection, we can wipe out their cellular machinery using antibiotics. Viruses, though, they aren't even made of cells. They sit in this super weird gray area between living and non-living because they absolutely have to hijack a host cell to reproduce. Since they don't have their own cellular factories, antibiotics are completely useless against them. You pretty much just have to let your immune system do the heavy lifting.
Now let's zoom all the way out to the absolute pinnacle of complexity, the human nervous system. Your brain and your nerves basically run entirely on electrical thresholds. Inside a resting nerve cell, the ions create an electric potential of -70 millivolts. But -55 millivolts, that is the magic number. It's the exact all-or-nothing trigger point. If a stimulus pushes that cell's charge to -55 millivolts, boom, the neuron fires an action potential. If it falls even slightly short, absolutely nothing happens.
Once that threshold is hit, ion channels just fly open. Ions rush in, momentarily reversing the charge in a flash of depolarization. This triggers the next gate,
then the next, sending this electrical wave racing down the axon of the nerve. It even jumps across tiny gaps called nodes of Ranvier, so it can travel at literal lightning speed. When that spark hits the end of the line, the synapse, it forces the release of chemical neurotransmitters to bridge the gap and trigger the very next cell. And here is the wildest part of all of this. Action potentials are always the exact same strength. The only difference between feeling a gentle breeze and touching a burning hot stove isn't the size of the electrical spark inside you. It's strictly about which specific nerves are firing and exactly how rapidly that chain reaction repeats.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want you to just let this thought sink in. We started with a flaming rock and some basic molecules, and we've built all the way up to human consciousness. Isn't it incredible, and honestly a bit mind-bending, to realize that every single human experience, every sunset you've ever watched, every complex thought you've ever debated, every profound emotion you have ever felt, is ultimately just chemistry in disguise? It's literally just ions passing through tiny gates, bouncing around a massive, complex network of microscopic electrical wires. So I'll leave you with this. If your entire reality, everything you are, is just the result of a perfectly balanced chemical equation, what does that make you? Keep learning, stay curious, and I'll catch you next time.